I thought maybe I could take a couple of minutes just to show this thing about matrix parameters that is supported in RUMBA. Well, I just thought I'd show. I mean, this is the first thing I've done with RUMBA and the matrix parameters, but let me start from the top here. I've loaded the RUMBA workspace. I've created a new server. Can you read this, by the way, or should I maximize the...
Bigger would be better.
Right. So in RUMBA, we create a namespace containing the parameters for a new server. You can see all the parameters by just checking in here. And all the defaults are set out there. So key things that are of interest is the callback on a received request and the context of where these callback functions exist. So that would be a namespace reference. And the port. I think that's the most important bits to set. You could probably get away with ignoring or using the defaults for everything else. So in my instance here, I've created a server configuration with port 9002, and I set the context to the root. I have a callback method defined in the root here, which is receiving a message from a client. This is the famous stop here, please. Apparently, I can't remember, was it last SwedAPL meeting, Morten recommended the triple jot.
3 jots, a minimum of 3 jots.
A minimum of 3 jots. Don't use ... full stops or any other character, because that might be...
Skulls might make them do something.
Right. So here is the mechanism of preparing a response. So we're passing the message to this new response method, and it returns a response object which has properties that we can set.
Det är ett meddelande från receptionen och vi kan meddela att faran över. Det har inte brunnit i fastigheten utan larmet orsakades av lite matlagningsverk. Vi ber om ursäkt för olägenheten och önskar en trevlig fortsatt på dagen. This is an important message from reception. We can inform you that there is no danger at all. There has not been any fire in the building, and the fire alarm started due to some cooking in an apartment. There is no need for you to do anything. We apologize for the inconvenience and wish you a very pleasant day.
Right.
It was a little late.
There was an hour.
I'm glad it wasn't.
You already jumped out of the window.
I'm reading out there wasn't a fire.
You might have heard something a bit earlier if there was a fire.
Yes, Paul Mansur, you probably missed that, but there was a fire alarm going off earlier during Morten's presentation, which caused a minor hiccup, and everything is okay now, apparently. Right, the on-request property is defining the callback to call when we receive a message from a client. And finally, we need to start this server. So we pass that as a left argument to RUMBA's core start method with a 0 argument, right? It's ignoring its right argument. And that's starting a listening loop. So it's just waiting for a request. And right, I can't start that on that port because it's already in use. So I'll change the port, and there we go. Now, is it safe to use a client on the same workspace, Paul? I'll start another workspace.
It is.
I don't know.
Should be.
Well, let's not experiment today. So
Chicken.
I'll start another session here, and let's see, we create a client similarly by calling RUMBA core new client, and again it ignores its right argument. We define the port as well matching, so 9001. The host is defaulting to localhost, so we leave that as is. And in addition to that, we prepare a request. So I need, let's see, core new request. And in this case, the URI is sort of important. And just to show what the matrix parameter might look like, if we have customer and we want to specify which customer we're talking of, we could say Adam and order, and we want to say the date is today, and the minimum cost is 1,000. So if we pretend that this is a RESTful request, this is specifying customers that have a name of Adam and where they have orders, where the order date is today, and the minimum cost is 1,000 something. I guess we could do that. So that's preparing the request, and I can then send that request by calling RUMBA core send and receive, which basically is a shorthand way of making a request and then closing the connection. So it's opening up a connection to that on that port, making that request on that URI, and then closing it. And the reason it's split like this is to enable you to prepare multiple requests, multiple different URIs, and then send all of those, so a vector of requests to the same endpoint, and then close it after you've received the response for all of those. So that's why there's a split here on a client configuration and the request. So if I had a vector of 10 requests here, it would send them all and wait for all the responses to come back as a vector of 10 responses and present the result in one go. Yeah.
Can
So
you
what
do
sort of
two row R as the right argument, send receive?
A two-row R. Yeah,
Just
I
duplicating
think.
the request.
Yeah.
So how is that?
Well,
what sort of
because,
protocol is that? Is that just using just chaining them together HTTP requests one by one down the wire?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So they might not come back in the same order.
No, they will. It's pipelining in HTTP, and it's defined they have to come back in the same order.
Okay. Cool. No, it's a scalar.
Oh, you mean enclosing R? No.
Or is it a scalar?
R is a scalar. Right. So that's.
You might not really want to do that.
Well, I've got it. Yeah.
If it's the same one, it's a reference, and I'm not sure when they come back.
Let's just, for the sake of testing this, if we do two. Well.
Is a chicken.
Right. So we've got two of those and two of those, and if we send that or send R, right? So omega is a vector of request, and the result is a vector of messages. And if I run that, of course, it's crashing. If I introduce the triple drop. But what we can see here is the message that the server receives contains plenty of different interesting things, like what was the URI originally.
Yeah.
I've got segments, the customer and order. I've got matrix parameters. Now you'll note that these are vectors of the same, well, basically as many segments as you've got in the URI. And the matrix parameters are parsed and delivered as name value pairs in matrices. So segment 1 has one name value pair, and segment 2 has two name value pairs. So basically, this gives you an alternative way of filtering your resources or requesting resources from the server. And the advantage being that you can refer to the different segments here. I guess an alternative way to represent this could be to say customer order, or perhaps order would be enough as a collection, and then pass it a query parameter where you say customer name equals Adam, or even Adam. And of course this will need to be URL encoded, but you get the gist here. So order date equals etc, etc. And I think I should mention they're not mutually exclusive. You can use matrix parameters without query parameters, or the other way around, or both together. So if you're using query parameters, as I understand it, they apply to the entire request as a whole, whereas the matrix parameters are affecting individual segments in the URI. Right, I think that was
cool.
What I wanted to show, and this sort of gives you an idea of how RUMBA requests are made and how to start a server.
Yeah.
I'm timed out. Oh well. I guess we'll have to close that anyway. So I guess if we get rid of that one, there should be a. It's closed the connection now, hasn't it? Let's see. Yay!
Yay! Well done.
Right.
Okay.
Would you like to add anything, Paul?
I would only add a couple things maybe about what REST, maybe some clarifications about what REST is, or maybe not clarifications, maybe more obfuscations. But you know, I think the probably in the future we won't even talk about it as REST as something different. It's just really, I think REST was Roy Fielding's, came out of Roy Fielding's dissertation, and I think he pretty much invented HTTP. And it's basically about using the web the way it's supposed to be used. And so it's a style. It's not a technology. REST is just a style of appropriately using the internet and getting the full value out of it. And so it's about using resources, which are, you know, I think Morten talked about defining all your resources, which, you know, have URIs pointing to them, representations of those resources, so things can come, you can ask for stuff in, say, you know, there's a resource, but I might want it in JSON, or I might want it in XML, or as a PDF, or what have you. And all of those formats, of course, are totally independent and have nothing to do with REST. They are just whatever, any sort of representation of a resource. And then you have a uniform interface to operate on those resources, which are the HTTP methods or verbs, get, post, put, and all those things. And that's really it. And I think an interesting, I kind of understood it when I implemented something that was, as Morton says, when you know what's not REST, but my first interface to FlipDB was a command interface or a remote procedure, RPC calls, where I had a whole list of things that I wanted to do, and basically everything was tunneled under a post. So if you wanted to get something, delete something, or do something, you would send a command with all of the parameters that were necessary to execute that command. But everything was tunneled under a HTTP post. And that's clearly not RESTful because you don't have a set of resources. You basically just have a single endpoint that you are trying to do everything under, and you don't get any of the advantages of caching. You don't get any of the advantages of all of the verbs, and you don't have a simple interface. People need to understand all your commands. And if you add something new, you have to add a whole bunch of new commands possibly, like I'm going to do some new thing I want to delete or some new thing I want to deal with. Whereas if you stick with these standard HTTP verbs, you get a lot of power out of that, and you define resources, and it becomes much simpler. And you also get all these benefits of things like caching when you use it right. So I just wanted to kind of point that out.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think when I've read about it as well, it's been a repeating subject that RPC isn't REST. And,
yeah, I mean, it's a good point, and it's probably one that, just by hearing Paul say it, you don't understand it. You need to actually
try it out.
Get it wrong a couple of times, and then maybe you'll start to understand.
At the edges of this, there are considered various levels of REST, and if you call something RESTful that is not the top level, you will get shamed. And the top level includes, I think somebody else mentioned there, the fact that your representation should include links to all of the things that you might want to do or do next once you have that representation in hand, once you do a get. And the analogy is kind of how you use the web as a human being, right? When you're a human being, you go to the web, and you just know one endpoint, Amazon.com, and then every page that you go to, you just click on things, and the page itself knows the next things that you want to do. So in theory, you should never even have to know all of the other links and resources, because the first thing that you get to has everything that you need. And that people are kind of making the cases that machines can do this too, and at the top level of REST, that's how it ought to work. But there's a lot of people arguing about that because
it's easy in theory.
It's not exactly clear how that would work with machines, but
okay.
So the first thing you learn in REST is that you should have all these nicely, clearly defined resources, and then you learn that, well, none of those really matter because the client should be able to be written in such a way that it only needs to know the first one, and the rest are all exposed automatically. Anyway, that'll confuse you. Let's not go there.
Yep.
I also had mentioned that HTTP 2. I'm dealing with HTTP 1.1, and 2 is a whole different animal. It's not simply a few things tacked on to 1.1. It's a completely different thing, and it's not like I'm skeptical whether we'll ever go there. I don't know. It's not also clear how it relates to RESTful style architectures versus web pages and stuff, because I think it's really optimized for web pages. anyway, that's
About that in 20 years, it's finally picking up some.
anyway, there's a lot of neat stuff in there, and there's more stuff. I'm getting ready to add conditional requests to Rumba, so it'll handle that stuff too, which can be, I think, can largely be handled by not by the back application, but by Rumba itself, which is nice. And
Can I ask quickly? Sorry, do you host this Rumba code anywhere for people to download, or are you happy that I give them what I got from you?
You can pass around what you have right there. I think I left it with Kai that we're hosting it, but it's not really open to the public to download. I think I could be wrong. I'd have to ask Kai about that. I don't think it is, but I'm happy to. You can just pass it around, and I was getting ready to discuss with Kai once if you start using it and are interested in it, that we would open that up and try and get it put somewhere where everybody can get the latest version and so on.
Right. Okay. Sounds good.
Excellent.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I hope you recorded your earlier talk so I can watch that later.
You don't want to see that, Paul.
Some of them were recorded. How many did we?
I'm happy to have a separate session with you, Paul.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested in the WebSocket stuff, so later on we can talk about that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Right, well, it's time for coffee.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to sign off.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you.